Hi everyone, it's the third week of We Mean Business, and I am very excited to say that joining me on today's show is the wonderful Sally Plant from the CISI. Hi Sally.
Hi Chanelle, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Have you been out yet?
I
Have you
haven't.
braved the cold?
I have. I've gone out for food, but I haven't gone out for drink yet. The most important thing to me was going out for a meal. What about you?
Yeah, no, well, I was out last night with my 5 closest girlfriends been my best mates since primary school, and it was just such a joy. I mean, it was cold, but it was
Yeah.
well and truly worth it. Well and truly
Yeah.
worth it.
It's nice, isn't it, seeing people out and sat together and eating. It's nice to see.
Feels like a bit of normality, after the last 18 months. And it also still has that touch of naughtiness, because you haven't seen each other for so long that, once you've got over the fact that you've really got nothing to say to each other because no one's been doing anything, you get back to the old dirty stories. It's great. Great.
Yeah. Oh, so funny. All right, brilliant. So, for anyone who doesn't know, Sally is the head of financial planning at the Chartered Institute of Securities and Investments. So, to start things off, Sally, can you tell us a bit more about why you do what you do?
Yeah, I suppose, I mean, I like people, and I really enjoy talking and learning to the planning community. I think that, it's quite unique. Most planners are really enthused by their profession, and they want to hear and help the next group grow and the next group coming through. And that's a really motivating group to be working with. And I believe in the CFP ethic. Nothing should be looked at in isolation. It's not just being about a specialist in one subject, but looking at everyone's needs and actually everyone's insecurities as well as their aspirations, and finding those next thought leaders in this profession, I think, is quite exciting. And obviously diversity is essential to that kind of innovation. And I've come back at a good time. The CFP is on a really exciting trajectory. I was thinking in the shower this morning, it's a bit like Coco Chanel, perfume, or number 5 Chanel, because the quality and consistency will always mean that it's always relevant, but actually it goes in circles, and there'll be periods when more senior people are wearing Coco Chanel, or more senior people in the pinnacle of their career are taking the CFP, and then boom, suddenly everyone remembers why it's so good, and you get this wave, and it comes on trend again. So I'm wearing Coco Chanel today, but there's definitely that buzz around the CFP at the moment. And I suppose because ultimately I believe planning is good for people. It's peace of mind. And I want to take a bit of responsibility and accountability to improve how consumers knowledge of what planning is, and so this is a good sort of position to be in, to be able to do some of that stuff. And then I suppose lastly, obviously I was at the CISI before, and I've come back. And I mean, it's a bit cliche, I suppose, but CISI is truly an enjoyable place to work. And I'm amazed at how sort of our senior team, so our top 5 directors, will continue to create a culture that's forward thinking and innovative. And I think innovation, to be innovative, you need to be given a bit of confidence, and they're consistently giving staff confidence to try new things. Perhaps that's because there's 40% women on our board and on our top group, and then that flows through to the ET group where there's over 50% women. So they've created this really strong, supportive and enthusiastic culture that sort of comes from Simon at the top, and then goes through to the planning committees that I obviously work with. And then I've had loads of encouragement from our membership as too. So I suppose all those components, the sort of planning committee, the culture where I'm working, and my true belief that the CFP is good, it does what it says on the tin, it's high quality, and and it does provide that holistic, all-round approach to financial planning, but also the belief that planning is really good and essential for consumers' peace of mind and the way we live our life. And so those, I suppose, all those components mean that I'm really loving being back, and I'm really enjoying the role.
Amazing. Brilliant. So, as you know, this show focuses on women in financial planning. So, can you tell us a bit about what it was like navigating your way in the profession as a young woman?
Yeah, I mean, I came into planning actually when I'd already had children. So, and I think that's quite common. I know a couple of my other friends have come into it. They've gone into para planning as a sort of return to work journey. And my boss was was very flexible and really big on development. I mean, undoubtedly doing my exams and working and having 3 children created its challenges, not just for me, definitely for my husband too. But what I suppose strikes me about the profession now is that although we're looking to change it, still quite a lot of firms and offices have that sort of traditional setup where the man is the dominant advisor and the female is in a more supporting role. Although I definitely think there's a change in the profession to change that, and the younger women coming through are definitely spearheading the way to be the thought leaders of tomorrow. But certainly I came in that way. So I came in when I'd already had my children and was returning to work.
Yeah. And what did you feel were maybe some of the biggest challenges you had to overcome in your career?
I guess when I was head of Middle East, I was relatively young, and I used to go on these Lord Mayor's trips. This is probably sort of 10 to 12 years ago, I suppose, maybe 15 years ago. And getting some of the more established males to take me seriously, almost wanting to sort of give me jobs as their PA, even though I was on the same tour as them, or that was always really quite frustrating. And I think you'd always find a couple of people who we were working with ESCA at the time, which is the UAE brokerage regulator, and they would always speak to me with such respect, and although they were all men, and that eventually flowed through. But definitely when I was coming through into sort of a wider financial services, rather than just planning, definitely sort of 15 years ago, 20 years ago, that perception that definitely the females were going to be in the more junior roles and were at some point going to go off and have their children was definitely a common one. And so getting people to take you seriously was definitely one of the biggest challenges. And to respect what you were saying on an equal footing, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. And then to spin that around and make sure we focus on the good things as well. What would you say has been the biggest rewards in your career so far?
Probably working on, fashion shows. Working on fashion shows is good fun, because they're incredibly intense. So you work phenomenal hours in a relatively short space of time. It's actually a bit like taking an exam, I suppose. You have that crux 6 weeks, and then that last 2 weeks, total panic. Not if you're preparing for the CFP, of course, but normally that's what people do. That's what I certainly had. But then with fashion shows, there is this moment that you then sit and watch the models come down the catwalk, and you do see everything that you've contributed to. And in my perspective, it was very small, but you do then see the end product. So that was always really rewarding. I suppose in terms of really making a difference, I was head of the Educational Trust at the CISI before I left. And we implemented some programs that are still going. So we got a guy called Matt Bolton, who's a teacher, and he still does it. And he goes into places like the City of London Corporation, which, the kids in there have come from some more challenging backgrounds. and definitely a diverse population. And he teaches them through the fundamentals of financial services, which is a very, very basic level qualification for school children.
Yeah.
And he takes them through the program, and they come out with a qualification. In fact, actually, this year's cohort is 100% girls, which I think is fantastic, because that shows that, you know, women are and young girls are looking for more diverse backgrounds, are looking at financial services as something that is attainable. But they go on, some of these kids, to get jobs in really big firms, you know, M&G, Schroders. And so that, in terms of something that isn't just promoting our profession, but is actually facilitating our profession, that I think is really rewarding, because again, you see the end result, and not, you wouldn't go as far as to say you've changed someone's life, but you've certainly created an opportunity that may not have existed, or created an awareness of something that may not have existed before. So that's definitely something that I would be proud of if I looked back on my career. And obviously, having only been in this job role for 5 months, I'm not sure yet, but hopefully I'll have an equally good tenure here. So that's the plan.
Yeah, definitely. We'll ask you again in a year's time and see what you say then. Amazing. So going back to talking about when you entered the profession, things like that, now sort of going forward to now, what sort of modern challenges do you think women entering the financial planning profession come across?
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because I still think, undoubtedly, you know, the big roles are still fairly dominated by men in the profession, and I don't know if, actually, weirdly, I don't know if the tragedy that it has been, the pandemic, which, let's face it, has been a tragedy, for actually this conversation will have accelerated where we need to get to, because the fact is, of the pandemic, is that, so if I look back at my working life, when I left my job role in London, it wasn't the work had got too hard or too stressful, and it wasn't that I didn't have a fabulous husband that sort of would do his share. The fact is that I wanted to be there, and it wasn't the working hours, it was this awful stress of having to catch the last train to make sure that I was there in time to pick up the kids, or, you know, to get back for whatever childcare I needed to get back to. And that feeling of panic, you know, when you were coming to that point, be in a meeting, you'd be thinking, oh my gosh, please finish the meeting, I've got to go. And so that kind of, the fact that now there is so much more flexible working, and more people are working from home, and their contracts are changing, and men are going to be working from home more, or rather partners are going to be working from home more, means that actually you lose that wasted traveling time, and there is naturally a bit more accessibility for flexible working, for you both to be doing your share of picking up. And actually, so therefore, hopefully we won't have this sort of historical point in time when women may take a career break because of the nature of their job role, and their need as a mother, and they want a mother, you know, to be around more, because that should even out. So I hope that particular challenge is going to be slightly eradicated from the acceleration of tech and flexible working from the pandemic. In terms of our other sort of modern challenges for women entering the financial planning profession, I think there are probably still some that have been historical. So things like, do people know about planning? You know, at school, at university? I mean, I definitely didn't wake up after university and suddenly think I want to get into financial planning or financial services as a profession at all. And so I think there is still that education piece for young people of either gender as to what planning is and how much the career can offer. And then for females, I think to make sure that there is some of those, you know, big female icons out there doing their thing, so that younger women are encouraged to aspire to be in those roles, gradually those roles will be filled by more women. So I still think that thing about looking at the big job roles and seeing them as male dominated, that's still a challenge for young people, and the perception of what the planning community is and stands for.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you yourself at CISI, are you doing anything to encourage more women into the financial planning profession?
I mean, as I said, we do quite a lot in terms of the young people education space. So this program with the City of London Corporation, we also have something running in Liverpool. And again, these aren't kind of promoting things, these are more facilitating things. So we have a regional network similar to the CII and loads of professional bodies, and they work hard to go into schools and universities and support. We have work experience programs, so that I think is very much aimed at encouraging all young people to go through into financial planning. We're looking at doing a couple more specific programs, but I can't talk about them just yet, that would encourage people, I suppose, a more diverse community. So that's not just looking at the gender, that's looking at the BAME, that's looking at across the whole diversity piece, because the importance of it is proven. You know, diversity means innovation and creativity. So we're in a profession where, you know, the average age is 58 or 59. So we know there's a gap for young people to come in, and we're going to need more people to come in. And we need to ensure that, you know, the Paul Etheridges of tomorrow and those kind of real thought leaders are going to come through. And for that, we need a much more diverse population.
Yeah, absolutely. What are you most excited to see in the financial planning profession over the next 10 years?
What am I most excited to see? I think, I mean, I've talked quite a bit about this sort of thought leader place. Are these people? I think they come out of nowhere. I don't think you can even necessarily. You can see people coming through that you think, wow, they're going to do something good in the profession. But you never pinpoint that moment, that one person comes up with that one idea that really blows the profession into the next space. So in terms of looking at what I think women are, you know, what am I most excited to see women in financial planning achieve over the next 10 years? I'd love to see some, you know, when we think about the true home of financial planning, instead of it being the sort of Paul Etheridges and the Nick Cans and people like that, I'd like to see more women's name on the top of that, and to really be looking at, you know, what's the next big innovation. I suppose, you know, you could say someone like Kate Holmes has brought us how to and was probably one of the first to look at how to utilize technology to really set up your office and deliver a superb client experience. So who knows what the next woman's going to do, you know, where the next piece of tech's going to take us, but definitely to see some more thought leaders, and some really well-renowned ones in the women's space would be great, and is exciting, because I said, you know, we're going to do it, so that's great.
Definitely, it is exciting. I think we'll see a lot in the next 10 years. I think we'll see some exciting things. Yeah,
totally. I mean, I was looking at speakers for an event the other day, and I came across Lauren, who's a CFP in the US, and I mean, she is the first woman to be a winter and summer Olympic sportswoman, right? And now she's coming to financial planning. And it's really interesting. I saw something in LinkedIn about sports professionals, you know, a next job, how many of them come into sort of this financial planning space. So maybe the next exciting thing for women will be to see some people, some actresses, you know, some drama students who so we're spreading where the base of where people are coming from and people's passions, and we'll see them coming through into the profession, because obviously their experiences are going to help us all innovate because they're coming from a different place. So that could be an exciting place to come from.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sally, you've worked in senior power planning roles and now you head up financial planning at the CISI. What advice would you give the people in our audience who are looking to transition from power planning into financial planning? I know I've been there, and it can feel like quite a big jump and it can feel quite daunting. So I'd love to hear what you have to say about that sort of jump in roles.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I would just say that actually, I think, you know, power planner, I think, always was positioned as the road to financial planner. Big shout out to power planners, because actually, I think, you know, my belief really is now that job role has become so established and it's so much broader, and the skill base that you need is actually incredibly vast, because you've got to be patient with many suppliers, those letters of authority claiming them back, but also, you know, you've got to be patient, you've got to be accurate, you've still got to be able to do the client piece, because so many of power planners are stretched into that area now. So I think power planning is actually a very established and interesting career in its own right. But obviously those that do want to go into financial planning, look, I'm bound to say it, but ultimately, so many power planners are qualified to sort of level 4 these days. It's more rare to find someone that's not. So therefore, I'd say the CFP, because power planners do already have the technical expertise, you know. So if there was another skill set that they're building on, it's that practical bit, it's the approach bit, it's incorporating all the aspects of lifestyle plan into the conversation bit. One of my committee members, a guy called David Hearn, was talking to us the other day about, you know, challenging conversations, how you have those conversations and how you approach them with clients. Things like, does everyone always want all their kids to get the same when they pass away? What about if one has married some multi-billionaire and the other one hasn't? You know, but those more challenging conversations. And I think the CFP, that's where it comes into its own right, because that's what it equips you on. So for an existing power planner, actually, maybe they don't need more technical knowledge. Maybe they've got that bit in the bag. Maybe it's the practical, the approach to the client bit, how to explain those assumptions. You know, that's maybe the bit that they need to go for, and that's where the CFP undoubtedly fits.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, it's interesting to listen to that, because I didn't know a lot about the CFP until a few weeks ago, till we chatted and you told me a bit more about it. So it's something that I was sort of unaware of, and I've only really sort of heard of the CII. So it's interesting to hear about it and the sort of different way it maybe helps you look at situations and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I really do believe planners learn from planners, you know. So, you know, that's not just something I chuck out. That's a mantra I really seriously believe. That's how the profession moves forward. And so therefore I believe absolutely 150% CII, there is a place for the charter. But equally, there's not one school for every child, although there is a school for every child. And the CFP, actually, the CFP complements the CII route. It's different, but it's the only practical qualification, and it's the only really true planning qualification, in terms of the fact that it doesn't take anything in isolation. You look at everything as part of a 6-step process, and as I said at the beginning, you know, it is a bit like Coco Chanel. It's not new. The longevity is there because the quality is there, because time after time, planners come back to the point that to do planning and to look at needs and not just investment or portfolio, you need to be looking at all those needs and looking at it from a more holistic view. And that's where the CFP sits. God, that was a terrible plug for the CFP. CFP.
No, it's interesting. It's definitely interesting to hear, though. I think everyone should have an idea of the different ways you can go, because I know personally from going down 2 different routes, the way I've gone now, I've done CII and I've done LIBF, and they're so different, and they work for different people, and I think one's not right or wrong, like you said. It's just that they suit people differently, and I think if one works for you, and if one doesn't, one doesn't. So I think totally. It's good to know what the options are.
Totally. What's been so, going back to that thing about why do I do what I do? I mean, what is so pleasurable about what I do is that the people that have the CFP love it. So, I mean, when you think about things that you really enjoy in your life, so one of my favorite books is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, and it's not actually the content of the book that I like so much. I love the exclamations at the beginning, but the reason I love the book is because it took me a long time to like it. I found it quite hard, but once I learned to read it and understand it, then I absolutely loved it. And it reminds me of the fact that not everything that you end up really appreciating is really easy to start with. It's not like you have to be naturally brilliant at tennis to end up enjoying it. So you finding a route that you enjoy and a style of learning that you enjoy is so important to help you succeed.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it's so important to talk about all your different options. Right, a couple of questions before we finish, Sally. Let's talk a bit more about you. So what do you like to do in your free time, your hobbies, your passions?
Free time? No. What's that? No. So I walk the dog a lot. I run. What do? I attempt to keep my girls off TikTok long enough for them to actually converse with me. But I mean, I'm not stupid enough to think that they would actually stop TikToking or dancing whilst we're conversing. But if they can just remove themselves from the actual thing, that's great. Occasionally having 1 or 2 more glasses of wine than I probably should do with my husband. That's also a joy. But no, I love being out in the fresh air. So I'm very fortunate where I live, especially in lockdown. It's been lovely. And I enjoy reading, and I love watching a thriller or who did it on the TV.
Me too. Amazing. So we are coming to the end, but I would like to ask you for a book or podcast recommendation that our audience will find inspiring. What do you have for us?
I would say, it's inspiring. So I would say a podcast that I like, it's a bit traditional. I like Woman's Hour with Emma, because I don't necessarily agree with everything she says, but I don't think you have to agree with everything, or I don't think you have to agree with things to enjoy them. I think sometimes, listening to someone who's a bit controversial also is really enjoying, giving you a different viewpoint. And as I said, my favourite book, Mrs. Dalloway, although my favourite quote from a book is by Anne of Green Gables, and I'm not a particularly religious person, but at the end of the book, she said, "If God's in His heavens, all's right with the world." And I just like that kind of thing. That if people are in the right place, then everyone's ducks are going to fall into rows. Or as I learned recently by a very important person, ducks don't go in a row, in a line. They go round and round in a circle. Anyway.
Oh, how funny. Oh, amazing. Thank you so much, Sally. Sadly, that is all we've got time for today, but you've been a fabulous guest, and thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks very much. Take care.
See you later. Okay, so, and of course, thank you guys for watching at home. If you did notice, I kept putting my microphone on mute because I had a bit of a noisy dog downstairs and a noisy family. So Sorry if you guys heard any of that, but I guess that's what happens when you work from home. But on next week's show, we have another brilliant guest, so keep your eye out to see who that will be. And if you'd like to keep up to date with upcoming shows, get recordings of previous ones, plus more about the world of women in finance, please sign up to the mailing list, which we posted in the chat. Thank you all for watching. Have a great weekend, and we will see you